I think you have to have integrity, number one, because if you haven't got that, you haven't got anything really. You have to be approachable as a leader. You know, your team can't be scared of you, but you can't be their best friend either. But you've got to tread that fine line and be human. I don't know if this was on my original list. I'm sure it is somewhere because I'm always banging on about it, but you have to know your numbers.
Welcome to Future Fit Leadership, a podcast for emerging, experienced and executive leaders to build community, grow capability and future focus their career pathways. There has been a global shift in how we lead, and our conversations with leaders and executives explores the skills, strategies and mindsets that is needed to thrive in this ever-evolving landscape of the future. So whether you are a seasoned executive, an aspiring leader, or simply curious about the future of leadership, we are here to give you practical insights to unlock your potential, change the status quo, and break open our assumptions on how work works. Produced in partnership with Future Leadership, a capability ecosystem for boards and executives, Future Fit Leadership is your place for bite-sized learning for executives hungry to make a change. Hello and welcome to Future Fit Leadership. I hope wherever you are listening to this podcast, you are well. If you have ever led a business through the messy middle, that unpredictable stretch between startup hustle and steady growth, you will love today's conversation. My guest, Jenny Stilwell, has been there, rebuilt there, and coached countless leaders through it. Jenny's career has spanned CEO roles in both public and private companies, her own marketing firm launched during a recession, and now her advisory practice helping founders scale beyond that tricky $2 million mark, the point where only 7% of businesses ever make it. That figure became the title of her book and podcast, The 7% Club. What I love about Jenny is that she doesn't sugarcoat leadership. She talks candidly about the emotional tug of war that comes with letting go, trusting others to take the reins while you step fully into the CEO role. She shares practical lessons on structure, capability, dashboards, and that delicate dance between trust and control. We also explore how small business leaders can stay focused in a world full of shiny distractions, why knowing your numbers is an act of self-respect, and how curiosity and strategy fuel sustainable growth. Jenny's approach to leadership is grounded, sharp, and full of hard-won wisdom. Here is the remarkable Jenny Stilwell. Well, good morning, Jenny. Welcome to Future Fit Leadership. How are you today?
Good morning, Sadna. I'm very well, thank you. A little bit on the cold side this morning, but apart from that, I'm fine.
I'm assuming you're based in Melbourne then?
I am indeed.
Yeah, so am I. And we had summer till the weekend and then it's just changed overnight. We've all
Hasn't
gone,
it?
oh, what happened? Jenny, you've had a really interesting career, and I want to start at the very beginning, a bit like that song, let's start at the very beginning. But what influenced your decision? Like what was the background? How did you get into that career around business and strategy? And, you know, you've worked as a CEO for privately and publicly listed companies. So how did it all start?
Oh, good Lord, what a question. Look, I think my early days was in marketing. I didn't do a marketing degree, but I saw an opportunity in the company I was in and I was interested in marketing, so I got into that, and then that took me on the sales and marketing sort of general management path. And I think, you know, one of my superpowers, if you like, is to fix things that aren't quite right, or to analyze a business and understand it and then put things in place to make it better. So I've always done that just naturally. And that led to CEO roles. And then I sort of stepped out and had my own advisory company. Prior to that, I had a marketing company in a recession, which was great. But I built that up and then I went back into corporate. And so I've sort of, I guess the last 20 years, I've had the CEO roles and then had my own business advisory. And then I've gone back, I've run a couple of companies for clients. But it's just what I'm really interested in, going into a company and understanding what makes it tick, how it's running, what's working, what's not working, and putting improvements in place. So it's just something I'm naturally drawn to. And I guess that's the foundation of everything I've done for a very long time.
If you think back to the first role you got as a CEO, quite often we have
Mhm.
amazing lessons that you learn from that first role. Like when you take that step up and you look back or you reflect back over the years, there are a number of lessons that you learn, I believe, from that first step up that you did. Can you remember what some of those lessons that you might still tap into today?
Oh, vividly, vividly. I think the first one is actually, as you said, that stepping up thing. I was talking to a client yesterday, and that person is in the position now of stepping up into running the company from a marketing perspective. And I could see the resistance. And I said to her, look, I've been in exactly your position. I understand. Your whole career has been about marketing. You're passionate, you love it, but you have to step up now to run the company. And it's a huge step because you don't want to let go of what you've always done and what you love. You've got no reference points for the role that you're taking on, and it's challenging. You want to take it, but you don't know what it involves. You don't really want to let go of what you love. So that's the first thing. And even working with my clients, I see that that's a very big step, even for a founder to shift from operational to more of a CEO role. It's a massive shift. And I remember it vividly. I think the other thing, and that's a big one, which has underpinned a lot of work I've done, is not knowing at the time how to have some control over the business without controlling.
Mm.
So things like, having good processes in place and having a dashboard in place and being able to see at a glance what's happening in the business without having to dive into it yourself. It took me a long time to learn that. And now, I think that's so important. It's what everyone needs to be able to run their business effectively. Having that structure in place and those dashboards that would enable you to really understand what's going on in the business. Unless someone's told you that or you've come from that background, you don't necessarily know it. And I think that took me quite a while to work out. But then, like with everything, once you learn it, you never step back. You move forward and put that in place all the time.
So you've run, as I said earlier, you've worked in CEO roles in both public listed companies and private companies, and now you run your own business. You've got your own podcast, the 7% Club.
Yeah.
How different is it from working for somebody else to working for yourself, for you?
It's fabulous. I like self-determination. I like to be able to lead and take the direction that I think is the right direction. I remember years ago, I was GM of a sales and marketing in a company, and we'd been taken over by another organization. And gradually, there were two sets of GMs for all different functions in the business. And gradually, one by one, those in the company I'd been in were all made redundant. And I was kind of the last person standing, and there were two GMs, and they tried to take the company forward with a completely different business model. We'd been B2B in a very defined space, and suddenly they wanted to go B2C, and it was a different technical capability required and all these things. And I remember doing a review of the business and how we were going to navigate forward. And I presented it to the managing director and the rest of the executive team. And he was absolutely horrified. And he looked at me and he said, well, you've presented that like an external consultant. I still don't quite know what he meant by that. But in my head, I thought, well, that's probably just as well, because that's what I'm about to go and do.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting for me because I did everything I could to navigate this new path forward, which was really not the right choice. But when you do your own thing, you can navigate your own path, whether it's right or wrong. And I like to be able to do that.
On your website, which I love because you've got lots of short, really informative articles. They're easy to read and they're quick and they're really, really informative. You wrote an article on the 11 insights that come from having a long career of advising small business CEOs and running companies yourself. And I want you to go through the 11, but when you wrote them, what were the sort of the top three that would stand out for you?
Oh, now you're testing me. Oh, I can't remember what I wrote. I think you have to have integrity, number one, because if you haven't got that, you haven't got anything really. You have to be approachable as a leader. Your team can't be scared of you, but you can't be their best friend either. But you've got to tread that fine line and be human. I don't know if this was on my original list. I'm sure it is somewhere because I'm always banging on about it, but you have to know your numbers.
I think it was on the original list. And I want to talk about knowing your numbers because it's an interesting concept. Well, not concept, but something that CEOs, anyone really who runs a business needs to do. But you have a very strong focus on knowing your numbers.
Yeah, it's one of my passion topics. Look, I think there's many things, but I do think having the integrity, knowing your values, it sounds a bit woo-woo sometimes, but it's not, because I always find it if you're faced with a really difficult decision and you have to make them as a CEO and as a leader, if you're struggling with it, you can fall back on your values to just reinforce which direction you should go. Is this the right decision? Am I feeling right about this, or is this just doesn't fit? So I think having those reference points are really important as a leader. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things. There's personal things in there. There's aspects about running a company. There's things like always make sure you've shored up capital when you don't need it, practical things like that, because sure as hell when you need it, it's going to be much harder to get. And that's a big lesson. So yeah, things like that.
You wrote the book, The 7% Club. What does the title signify?
Well, that was really interesting. I started writing a book about strategy, which essentially this is. And I was doing some research and I discovered that it was 93% of companies in Australia were under 2 million turnover. And I thought that doesn't sound right. And so I checked the comparable figures for the US and the UK, and there's US dollars, there's pounds sterling, but fundamentally the numbers were similar across the board. So only 7% of companies make it beyond 2 million turnover, which I find fascinating. And most people, I think, are pretty surprised by that number. So I thought, well, that's interesting. Let's have a look at what some of those reasons might be. Now, not every business, registered business, is necessarily a trading entity. There's lots of small businesses out there, solopreneurs, sole traders, and a huge number of businesses don't want to be more than 2 million turnover. They're happy to have, a lifestyle business. But for those that do, I started to look at what the challenges might be. And I drew on my own experience and also the clients I've worked with over the years, which is where the content for the book came from.
What were some of the hurdles or some of the barriers that you found in terms of why businesses don't scale up beyond the 2 million?
Number one, I think, is complexity. As a business grows, there's more moving parts, there's more people, more customers, and particularly if you've got a product-based business, the logistics of managing products. And then you could have a product range that you get ranging in a national retailer, a national supermarket, and then suddenly your business explodes with complexity. So that's a big one, just getting to the point where there's more of everything happening. More transactions, more people, more things to manage. So complexity is a huge one. Not having the right structure and team is another one. Massive challenge, because a lot of businesses start and they have their early employees. And then as the business grows, that person who came in to help out a few days a week suddenly finds themselves with a lofty title of business manager or general manager, and they're just imploding with the pressure. And the person who owns the business is reluctant to let them go. The person who's stuck in that role that they're not doing very well is reluctant to say anything because they still want to help. And that's a huge challenge as a business grows, just not having that capable team of people in place. And then I think the other one is not having clarity of direction, just having a fragmented focus on where you're going and what to go after, where to take the business. They're the three big ones that I see.
And I imagine when it comes to the focus, particularly the strategic focus, when you're scaling up, you would have a lot of things coming at you as a business leader or as a board or as a team. How do you suggest that they maintain the focus? Because without that, they're not going to be able to scale up.
I created something years ago called the decision-making framework, and I've used it when we've been doing strategy days to help provide a tool that makes the strategic direction very clear. So if you've got, let's say, 10 different ways to go, or 10 opportunities sitting on the table, once you look at it from a strategic perspective and feed it into this framework, what's going to come out are one or two clear winners, if you like, the two to focus on. And I remember doing that one day with a company, and they'd been in business for like 25, 30 years. And they had so many opportunities. It was
Mm.
unbelievable. And I presented this and we fed them into this framework. And the MD was just completely blown away. And he said, "Can I have a copy of that framework?" And I think without that, we can all go off and go, "This will be great. And it's a fantastic opportunity." And you get started, you go, "Oh, I don't think this is going to be it." But if you go through that process of really taking a company through strategic planning and understanding your opportunities and where your strengths and weaknesses are, who your key relationships are, then you put these opportunities into a framework and it really helps you focus because you can
Mm.
just keep coming back to that and going, no, that's what we need to focus on.
Mm. And I imagine tied into this is what you also talk about, which is the capability gap between founders and their teams and their ability to scale up.
That's a huge one. And it's interesting because as companies scale, I've heard so many times the founders say, "I've got all these people here and it's costing me a fortune. And, I'm still doing as much work as I was without them." And that's when often they'll say, "Sometimes I think I should just scale this business back to being smaller in the way it was before." And that's because in the early days, they tend to employ people who don't have the skills they really need in the business. They don't have the experience that they can come in and take ownership of things and help grow the business because, those resources cost a lot of money. The founder often has never worked with those kind of people. They don't have the reference points of what that can mean to their business. Sometimes they're a little bit threatened by it. If
Mm.
I bring that person in, they'll know more than I am. Well, yeah,
It's a
that's
good
kind
thing.
of the point.
Mm.
They can help you grow the business. So there's a huge capability gap between the most capable person in the team and the founder of the business. And that gap is what stops them from growing. And until
Mm.
they can close that gap, they're not going to be able to scale.
In terms of structural issues, if you're moving from startup mode to growth mode, what are some common structural issues you've come across in businesses?
Startup to growth mode. I think people tend to throw people at problems rather than saying, well, hang on a minute,
So true.
before we employ this extra person, could we be doing this differently? And really having a look at that first. They just
Mm.
bring people in, and the people they bring in sometimes don't really know what they're meant to be doing.
Mm.
There's no clear processes. So everything's still in the founder's head and they bring people in, expect them to be functional and perform, and they can't be because they have to keep going to the owner of the business or the leader to say, well, is this right? Or what do I do next? So not having that clear processes in place, not looking at how they do things and how to improve it before bringing people in. I think that's a big one because then suddenly you can have too many support people in your team for the revenue that you're making, and then that starts to erode your profitability, and that's not a good path to be on. So again, that goes back to not looking at the numbers as
Mm.
well as not really assessing whether you need new resources or whether you need to change how you're doing things, and then not having the processes in place as well.
One of the things I see a lot is business owners, so founders or the leaders, actually not letting go. So, they had a lot of control when they were in startup mode because you have to be, because your name is across particularly every door, particularly when you're in startup mode. And then you get to growth mode and you still have that mindset in your business as a leader. So you actually almost constipate the decision-making process where people still have to come to you for everything to be ticked off right down to the minutiae. How does that impact the teams and when you are trying to scale up from a business and leadership perspective?
Well, I think number one, it's demotivating. It's very frustrating for the team. And sometimes I've seen those leaders who don't change. They just don't change. They will not let go. So they may still bring in capable people around them, but every now and again they'll take over or they'll ignore their decision because they've still got that, well, I'm the founder and this is what I'm going to do. So it can be very demotivating for the team. They feel they're not trusted or they're not respected. And that's what I was saying in the very beginning. I think that making that shift from being the owner and I'm the source of all knowledge here, I'm the source of all decision making that shift to being the CEO with a capable team around them that will help them grow the business, that's a massive shift.
Mm.
And some people get there gradually, and I think if they've got the right team, it's that fine balance between trusting the team and letting go.
Mm.
It's an incremental thing. Well, that was really good. That person is really capable. I can let a little bit more go to that person. And then the trust builds, and then they let a little bit more go. And it's a dance of trust and release. And it
I like
takes
that.
quite a while.
You talked about knowing your numbers and how important it is. Let's talk about that. What are some of the key measurements that you think businesses need to consider?
The question I come up against all the time. What do we need on our dashboard?
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'm always banging on about margin, how important margin is. I've seen companies go out and win big deals worth hundreds of thousands or even $1 million, and the margin is barely accounts for any buffer. It's almost a break-even
Insignificant.
situation.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. So you
Mm.
think, well, all the time and effort and engagement of resources to get that piece of business for nothing, what else could you have been doing? What was the
Mm.
opportunity cost of doing that? So I think the margin is critical, because that's where you make your money. So that's very important. I think looking at ratios, and I always say to my clients, look at everything as a percentage. So if you're looking at something quickly, rather than having to go through the numbers and sort of work it all out, you can look at the percentages and just see how they're shifting. Are they trending up? Are they trending down? Are they going the right way? And that will tell you straight away whether you need to look more deeply into something. And then I think there are obviously bottom line profit, revenue per employee, profitability per employee, ratio of wages to sales. I think those things are a great litmus test. Are we getting a little bit too heavy with resources here? Or are we still, we're traveling well, we're working efficiently as a
Mm.
team? And then going into different aspects of the business, looking at your marketing indicators and looking at your operational indicators, that's obviously going to be different for every business. But I think really understanding what's happening operationally is very important.
Mm.
Looking if you've got a field team, what are they doing? Are you delivering to your clients in full and on time? Having those discussions around what are we actually doing in the business? What are our core processes and how well are we delivering at each point? So I think having those broad financial indicators is a must, looking at the relativities and then drilling down into each area of the business to
Mm.
understand your operational indicators and sales and marketing.
Have you seen the best way to align KPIs or business measurements with people and the outcomes that you're trying to achieve?
Great question. Not an easy answer.
No, and that's the most difficult things. I think
It
whether you're
is.
a startup, scale up, or in growth mode, whatever it is you're doing, it's the hardest thing to do.
It really is. And it takes quite a while. It's quite an exercise, as you know. Look, I think, and again, it goes back to that departmental thing. You've got to have this strategic plan for the whole business. I've seen people trying to put together KPIs for individuals in the team without that big overarching strategic direction. And that's hard because, well, what are we trying to achieve as a company? So I think having that company strategy and goals in place is really important. And then obviously tying easy things in like sales,
Mm.
that's quite easy to do, and client retention, and then looking at your marketing, what role is marketing having in our strategic plan? And then the operational side, it's just a matter of taking that aspect of the overall company and going, okay, well, how does that relate to our delivery? How does that relate to our sales strategy? How does that relate to our client engagement, and working through it that way? But, there's no easy answer. I haven't found an easy answer. I wish I did, but I
Mm.
haven't. It
No, I
just
think
takes time.
it takes time, and I think you've just got to keep a constant focus on it and keep people constantly engaged with it. I've tried things like the big, you will go for a bridge walk if we get all our numbers. We'll go for a helicopter ride if we get all of our numbers, whatever it takes to get people to be focused. And sometimes that's what you have to do. But it is
Yeah.
a constant focus you need to have with your business and your people on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even 90-day
Mm.
views. I've certainly always had one-on-ones with my key leadership team on a regular basis, but I think certainly revisiting those bigger numbers quarterly, are we tracking? do we need to sort of adjust anywhere? How are we going? It certainly keeps everyone mindful that that review is coming up, and it helps to keep them focused on their KPIs. But it's a bit of the dark arts, a bit of science.
Talking about focus, when you're working with leaders or when you're coaching leaders, how do you get them to stay focused in a world where there is so many shiny objects? I mean, at the moment in particular, when you're leading a business, there's so many different things you can run to that are new and shiny and exciting. It may not be the right strategic way for your business to go to, but we have a lot of options available to us right now. How do you keep leaders focused on what they need to be doing?
Great question. I think it goes back to some of the things I said before about the framework for decision making. Opportunities will come up and they get really excited about it. And, we could acquire this business, or, we could bring this person on board. But then knowing I guess, the strengths and weaknesses and the goals that the business has and where they want to go and what the strategy needs to be to get them there. Sometimes it's just a few simple questions about, well, I mean, I've had people, B2B companies, want to acquire other companies that are B2C, or they want to acquire the wrong client base, or bring on people that clearly aren't going to fit. So it's a matter of having the experience to be able to see that and take them through a few questions and have a discussion around it. And they go, yeah, it's probably not right for now. We have to have those conversations because there are all sorts of opportunities, but it's just being able to fit it into that strategic picture of where they're going, rather than let them wander off down another path somewhere.
You've spoken a couple of times now about your decision-making matrix or process. If I was listening to this and I was a leader, I'd be going, how do I access that? How do I, is it something that you coach into businesses? How would I get you to show me what that matrix looks like?
Well, you can give me a call and I'll come and show you.
Great.
But it's IP that I developed.
Yeah.
It's not complex. It's quite simple, but it really helps it's like a sorting tool, basically. And it just really helps.
And talking about that, contacting you is on LinkedIn or on your website?
Either, yeah, LinkedIn probably.
Yeah. Okay. Going back to the strategic planning and the decision-making process, you write about 6 questions to think about as a starting point. I don't want you to go through all 6, but if you were doing part of your planning prep now for the next 12 to 18 months, what are some of the questions that you should be asking yourself or of your team?
Well, I think what is often missing is gathering the business insights. So people go about strategic planning more from goal setting. Let's set some goals. Well, okay.
That's not a strategic plan, is it?
Exactly. And it's very hard to be excited about goals. We're going to increase sales by 25% next year. Yay. So I think getting feedback, like understanding, again, looking at the numbers and understanding where you've been focused in the business and what's working well and what's not working well, what's profitable, what's not profitable. What do you want more of? What do you want less of? In terms of your products, your services, the clients that you're going after, the clients that you have. It's also really important, and most of the companies I work with don't do this. Get insights from your clients and your customer base. And I don't mean just a quick survey, how good was our service kind of thing, but really get strategic insights from different tiers of your customer base and find out, again, what is working, but what else could you be doing for them? How else could you be adding value? What other products or services could you add value? That's a really important piece that I think most companies don't do. So those insights are really important. And then I think the vision is something. I had a session with a client the other day, and I was asked, is the vision something that you're ever meant to achieve? So what's more important, the vision or the strategy? And in my opinion, the vision has to be exciting. You get close and then you make the vision a bit bigger or a bit different, and it does evolve. And it has to be something that everyone believes you can work toward. Otherwise, what's the point? That's not motivating. But I think the vision does need to be exciting, because I think there needs to be emotion strategy as well as just, here are the numbers, this is what we're going for. So, looking at what works, what we're doing well, what's really good for the business is really important. And companies always look at, say, with client acquisition, we want more. How are we going to get more clients and more sales and more? and they tend to forget about the clients and customers that they already have. And it's taken a lot to get these. We need to look after them. And if we add value to these clients, even to just a portion of them, that's going to really improve our business. You know, people tend to forget what's already happening in the business. And you've got to look inside, you've got to look outside at where the opportunities are, what your clients think, and put all of that together to work out, well, what's going to be the best fit for us, rather than just let's increase sales, let's get more clients, you know, that numbers driven thing, which doesn't engage anybody.
What advice do you have for leaders who are wanting to scale their business and to do so in a sustainable way?
Well, you have to be strategic. Yes, you have to be opportunistic
Mm-hmm.
and move quickly when you see the right opportunities, definitely. But as a leader, you're like the conductor. You know, your team is following you. And if you want sustainable growth, again, you need to be strategic. You need to navigate through the bright, shiny objects that aren't going to work. And you need to go toward those things that are going to build your business in the longer term, and be able to do that because you've assessed that. You know, you are strategically navigating. So I think that's really important. You can't just fly by the seat of your pants, and that will get you to a certain point, but it's not going to get you to a sustainable business model. And you're not going to have a sustainable business unless you think about what you're doing and you are strategic. And can't stress that enough.
So we've come to the point in the time of the podcast, Jenny, where we ask all of our guests our future fit leadership questions. So
Yes.
my first one to you is, if you had to describe a future fit leader in just 3 words, so this will be the kind of leader that we will need most in the years ahead, what would they be and why?
Well, I think the number one thing is to be adaptable. I think that's critical with all the change that's happening around us. You have to be adaptable. Again, you have to be strategic because of all the change. And I think with everything that's happening, and it's important to be a great communicator as a leader, but I think it's going to be even more important to be an excellent communicator and have those emotional intelligence skills as well, because your teams are going to go through a lot over the next few years. There's going to be a lot of change. And I think it's even more important. It's already important, but it's going to be even more important to have that empathy and be able to communicate well.
What's one future shift coming in the next few years that you think most leaders are underestimating or not prepared for?
I think AI. It's funny, I spoke to someone the other day who had just finished a very successful global corporate career. And she said to me, "Have you ever used AI?" And I nearly fell on the floor. I nearly fell on the floor. And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, I've never really had to use it." And I thought that was bizarre. But then I spoke to someone who was 30 and just starting to use it. So there's this massive spread of what people are doing with it. And I think there is a lot of curiosity, but people are underestimating it. And I think AI is seriously going to change not just how we work, but it's going to change whole layers of roles and careers. And there's going to be a really big shift in terms of people coming out of university or people going into business, and what their roles look like in the years to come and how that feeds into an organization. I think that's a massive shift.
I have to say, it has allowed me to have more efficiencies in my day, the way I use the available
Oh,
AI to me at the moment.
I love it.
Yeah, I
Love
couldn't live
it.
without it now. It's
Same.
like having an assistant that's not human, that does the things that I need it to do, that are unemotional and,
Mm.
easy things as such, but I don't need a human to do it. In the past, I would have had to hire someone to do some of those jobs. Yeah.
Absolutely. I use it every day. I love it.
What do you wish more leaders were paying closer attention to?
Paying closer attention to. I think this shift that we just talked about, I think that is going to be massive, and you need to be thinking about it now because it's happening now, and it is going to affect team structures, resourcing, how business units operate. It's going to have such a big change. And I think, if you're not looking at it, or you're not using it too much at the moment beyond as a tool, as an efficiency tool, look to companies that are using it. Look to those big firms that are really embracing it and what they're doing, because you really need to pay attention. It's going to happen so quickly.
What are possibilities or shifts you see in the future of leadership, so how we lead, how we work, that really excites you and why?
Well, I think what's happening now, whilst it can be a little bit scary, it's also fascinating and exciting because it's not since probably the Industrial Revolution since we've seen a change so massive. And even though the Industrial Revolution, when it happened, was huge, it didn't happen as quickly as the changes are happening now. It's exciting to see what comes out of that because with the downside, there's always massive upside. And I think this is exciting. And I think if you can get on the crest of the wave and not be dumped on the beach,
Yeah.
it is going to be very, very interesting how that impacts businesses and people in a good way, as long as you're prepared for it.
And the last question is, if you could embed one leadership quality into every current and future CEO, something that you believe will be essential for the next decade, what would it be and why?
I don't quite know how to describe this. It's not being analytical, it's being probably discerning enough. Discerning, I mean, empathetic. To be empathetic is critical, but to be able to navigate through how this change unfolds and how business is impacted and what that means to people. I think leaders are going to have to be very discerning in understanding what's important, what's perhaps a little bit extraneous, bright, shiny object, and to know what's important to focus on to lead their team forward. So it's many things. It's being focused on the bigger picture, but in the process of getting to the bigger picture, being able to really know what's important and what's not important when there's so much information being thrown at us and so much technology and so much change, just staying calm and being able to calmly and intelligently navigate through that. And that's not one word, I'm sorry, but I haven't got one word to describe that.
That all makes sense. Many words, but they all sort of make sense. Jenny, thank you for joining us. Now, you've got your book, The 7% Club. You've got your podcast, which is also called the 7% Podcast, is it?
7% Club Podcast, yes.
7% Club Podcast. And if people want to contact you, they can do so on LinkedIn or through your website, which is jennystilwell.com.au.
Yes, correct.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing your insights today.
Thank you, Sada. It's been great talking to you.
If you like what you've heard, please share, rate and review this podcast. And don't forget to share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing it. The producer of Future Fit Leadership is Maritza Barone from Guide Your Light Network. If you would like to reach out to me, please DM me on any of my social media platforms. I'm available for speaking at conferences or consulting to your business. Future Fit is created in partnership with Future Leadership, a capability ecosystem for boards and executives. If you'd like to join the community and receive a free takeaway each week, sign up to the Future Exchange app in my show notes. Thank you for having me in your space.
This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.